Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel, welcome back to the toy shop. So, you've caught me in the middle of doing a little bit of emergency triage to a bunch of soldiers that ended up here at the shop. What you are looking at here is just a random G.I. Joe I have pulled from a sizable collection that we are considering at the moment. However, the problem with said collection is that it is an old childhood collection that is still in a myriad of different pieces. So, I have to figure out exactly what it is worth in order to figure out what we can offer for it. But to do that, I have to figure out what from the collection is still viable. And unfortunately, the only way to do that right now is to repair as much as I can, figure out what Joes all have their parts, and then figure it out from there. So, I want to do this on screen, on camera, just a little bit, just so you know what the last 3 days of my life have kind of looked like here at the shop. So, I have presented as much as I can here on the screen. I've thrown this together because I'm not set up to film here at the shop like I used to be. So, you'll excuse me if this is like a little bit slapdash or if things are a little bit out of focus from time to time. I'm working with what I can here. But I wanted to give you some idea of what the process is like. So, if you've never actually repaired a G.I. Joe before, or if you don't even know anything about G.I. Joes. So, let's say we're taking like Rock Viper here, and we're going to do what we can to get him back on his feet. Now, everything with a G.I. Joe comes down to the rubber O-ring that is inside. I do have a fresh bag of them. These are pretty inexpensive to get off of Amazon. 50 of them will run you like $7 or $8. It's not a big deal to get these. I will say that I have read that these mass-produced ones, that are air quote like correct replacement size for G.I. Joe toys, from what I've read, they don't really last all that long. But one, they're dirt cheap, and two, if you're just displaying them, they should last for plenty amount of time. For the most part, we're just looking to try to hold them together for a few years at a time. Because really, this is not all that problematic. So, I'm going to take the one screw and unscrew it. So, when you do the unscrewing, keep in mind a lot of times that screw is going to be pretty rusted, and this thing is going to be stuck together for the last 40-odd years. So what I'm doing with the initial unscrew is I'm putting enough pressure there to make sure I'm not stripping the screw by accident, and I'm putting very careful, gradually increasing pressure on the screw as I turn it. And I just want to get that initial like crack of the seal breaking before I really go in and start unscrewing things. So this is literally the only thing holding any of these Joes together. So once that screw is undone, then you can get on into the inside of the toy. That back piece is going to have that little O-ring remainder. I am collecting them just so I can see how... I want to see just how many dead rubber bands I've recovered by the end of all this. So, the process of actually replacing this is not terribly hard, actually. So, you want to try to get this pelvis detached from the legs. I find in a sitting position, it usually comes out a lot easier than it does if you try to just yank it out. And you don't want to just yank it out because the groin piece on the G.I. Joes is one of the parts that are most prone to breaking. So you need to try to avoid that at all costs. Be very careful when handling your soldiers' groins. Now, first thing to do is to find that hook that is in between the legs. Go ahead and put the new O-ring into said hook. There are tools that make this a little bit easier, but you don't really need them, honestly. I'm going to thread the rubber band all the way through into the midsection, straight through his guts. I find if you take the hook through the right leg hole, they do tend to line up a little bit easier. And there we go. Now, The back side is what you want to work with. So you're going to loop that ring over that large screw hole, just like that. I like to force it backward a little bit so its tension holds everything together. Just like give the back just like a good bowing. That usually holds the torso to the pelvis despite it not being completely assembled yet. Here's the fun part. I put fun part with very large quotation marks. So now the trick is to get the arms and the head to stay in position on the back piece of the torso while you get the front piece on. And sometimes that can go pretty smoothly. We'll see how smooth it is here. I try to get the tip into the pelvis piece and then clamp it down. Once it's usually like this, then you can kind of wiggle things together and get it clipped together. He went pretty easily. This can get to be very, very stubborn as a process. Some of them just really do not like going back together. But that was fairly easy. Rock Viper is cooperating because he knows we're on camera right now. Good on you. Now, things are going to feel a little bit loose after you finally get everything back together because a lot of tension is being provided by that screw. So just go in, tighten that back up, and once it's sufficiently tightened, now things like the head should be a lot more secure than they just felt a minute ago. And behold, G.I. Joe ready to go back onto the battlefield. It's really a pretty simple process, all things considered. It's just time consuming to do a lot of it. So this one is complete. We go put his parts all back into the bag. We even have his tech specs. His little bio card there. So that goes back in. That is ready for evaluation. Now, I've done so far, here's my box of finished ones. I've done about 20 of these so far. My guesstimation is that there are about 70 in this collection, but I don't know how many of them are actually viable to reassemble. Now, some of them are trickier than others. So, for instance, here's Dojo, and Dojo's from a later run of G.I. Joes who do not have a screw in the back, but they do still have the O-ring. In order to get this guy repaired, he will have to take a few soaks in slightly boiling water, just enough to loosen up the glue without melting the plastic. It's a delicate process, especially for one like him who also has the hair, because I don't want that nylon hair to melt into the water. This is a very, very delicate repair job that I might not actually be cut out for. So, something about working in a toy store like this is inevitably you are going to end up with toys that you aren't necessarily familiar with. You're just going to have to get really knowledgeable about them really, really quickly. In this case, I was never a G.I. Joe kid. You know, I liked Transformers. I liked robots. I liked superhero toys. I didn't like these tiny little action figures based on all military guys. I wasn't a big military guy as a kid. So it just never really appealed to me. Ironically, the only G.I. Joe toys I ever had were the Street Fighter toys. So, I have to get very knowledgeable about these very, very quickly, as is required by the job. And that in itself is daunting. Like, I had no idea G.I. Joes went on for so long. So, for instance, doing the research and looking up the ID websites for these things, G.I. Joes came out in 1982 and lasted longer than Transformers G1. And they were still producing heavy numbers of figures even into their later years. It's ridiculous how many G.I. Joes there are. So, yeah, there's no way I'm going to be knowledgeable about all of these. I am fortunate that the owner of the collection did what they could to put figures back together with the parts that they actually are associated with. So, for instance, this iteration of Snake Eyes, he was nice enough to make sure that everything was together. So now we get to do restoration work on a vintage Snake Eyes toy. And yeah, before this, like I said, you gotta get familiar with toys that you do not know very quickly. I have never repaired a G.I. Joe figure in my life before this particular collection entered the store. But again, it's kind of required. I have no idea what to offer for a box of scraps. I need to know exactly what I'm working with here and how much of this is genuinely viable for resale. And to do that, I need to figure out what is actually intact and what can be repaired. This Snake Eyes is giving me a good example of another issue. Not all of them come apart easily. The pelvis on this one really does not want to let go of the legs, which means I'm going to have to thread the rubber band into his guts and try to get it onto the hook with my screwdriver. This is more annoying, and I've had to do a few this way already. There are little tools that could help, like little pry bar hooks that could do this a little bit easier, but again, this is not terribly hard. So just with a Phillips head, the same Phillips head I unscrew it with, yeah, I can get that hook onto the rubber band. No real issue here. So yeah, this is a first for me. So in a way, it's kind of cool. Like to know how to get these fixed, like, because it's a simple process, but not everyone realizes how simple. The truth is, a lot of G.I. Joe collections sell at shops like this dirt freaking cheap because the owner who brings them in just assumes they're all broken and that fixing them is going to be this massive undertaking. When in reality, it's one screw and one rubber band. You know, I kind of point to like the IT sector a little bit with this, and anyone who is like the IT guy for your group of friends or family will know how this works. You have this particular knowledge that is just escaping everybody else. To you, it is the easiest thing in the world, right? To diagnose and fix a computer problem, or to put in a new piece of computer hardware. Swapping in a new graphics card is absolutely nothing for me. But to ask any of my family who is technologically absent, let's say, it's a huge deal. So I'm the one who gets asked all the time to fix anything digital computer-wise, even if it's something I'm not familiar with. And that kind of feels the same as something like this. It's not a big deal. It's not hard. But because people assume that it is, you end up getting a lot of people wanting you to do it. And it ends up being like a weirdly specialized field, a weird skill to have that is valuable to people, even though there's really very little skill involved. Just a little bit of correctly applied knowledge, which I guess is any skill, really. So, okay, we have a Snake Eyes ready to go. Put that back in. So some of this is a lot harder to repair. So some of it is like, some of them I have to make the judgment call. Some of them actually have intact rubber bands. Do I remove the original rubber band when it's like holding together okay? Or do I actually go the extra mile and swap out the O-ring? That way they're handled a lot better. I don't know. I have to make that determination. Falcon here, I'm probably going to replace the band because while he is together, he is considerably floppy. So he will probably end up on the repair station at some point. But I'm not prioritizing him because I have others to go through. I have other ones here. So for instance, one of the ones I do know, one of the G.I. Joes I do know is Chuckles. And I have all the parts I need for Chuckles. The problem with Chuckles is he is very screwed up. Yeah, the yellow face is not intended. That's some sun damage going on. Yeah, so I don't know what to do with Chuckles just yet. I could repair him, but then again, he's got 2 busted elbows and a really sun-bleached face. So I don't know if he's just scrap or not. And that's the hard part about this. Like, some of this is unrepairable, but I don't know it until I try to get into it and really figure out the nuts and bolts of what's going on inside. Here's a Major Blood from a later line. He is, I believe, repairable. There are some that have like broken groins too. I don't know exactly what to do with them either. But yeah, let's see. Screw in the back? Yeah, screw in the back. We can repair this Major Blood. Now, this is not the only thing. Keep in mind, 20 to 25 now, somewhere around that picture. I still have to figure out about another 40 to 50 of these guys. And that's not even including the extra fun stuff. So, first off, there is that bag of parts. Look at how dense that is. Look at how much there is. You have just tons and tons of guns and backpacks and flags and missiles and all manner of things going on here. I have to figure out who these all go to in order to figure out how complete any of these things are and how many of them go to toys who aren't here. As someone who knows next to nothing about G.I. Joe, this is one of the most daunting tasks, is just figuring out where all of those parts go. And then I found the graveyard, which is a lot of unmatched legs and torsos. And the weird thing is, it's the crotches I'm looking for. It's the pelvic pieces I'm looking for. Not only because that is like the only that's the thing that makes the figure complete. There's no point to the arms, the torso and legs if I don't have the piece that goes between them. And that's the most easily broken and lost piece, as we went over. But also, like, oh my God, I've lost track of my thoughts. I've lost track of my thoughts because this is getting overwhelming. But like, the pelvis piece is also generally where the copyright stamp is. And without the copyright stamp, as someone who does not know G.I. Joe, I can't get a date. Like, all the websites that I've checked for like IDing G.I. Joes, just tell us the year. Tell us the year and the copyright stamp, and we'll tell you what Joe it is. I can't! His butt's gone! His butt was the only thing telling me when he was made. So I've got that, and then, hang on. Not even done. I've got 2 tubs of these vehicles that I also have to figure out how complete they are and if everything still works. So this Cobra Mamba, for instance, I had to piece a few things back together, like the tail fins, but for the most part, like, it's missing like little, like, it's missing the like the missiles and the drop bombs and all that, but for the most part, everything seems to be here, including a few parts I learned were hard to find, like the little launching tabs. Those tend to be lost because they're just C-clipped in. They're here. So in all of this, if I can manage to find the little missiles that are strewn about in the tubs that were brought in, I might actually have something viable there. But again, testing my knowledge that I do not have of G.I. Joe in the first place. So I do have like 2 full bins of just ridiculous numbers of accessory, like vehicle parts and shells of vehicles. So here's a Joe Jet, and unfortunately this one is not going to be salvageable. This is supposed to be gray. It is definitely not gray. This is heavily, heavily sun damaged. I will tell you this. A lot of these toys, a lot of the vehicles, feel like they were kept in a shed. These were definitely outdoor playtime toys, and they carry the trademarks of such. For instance, dirt caked in. The occasional dead spider crawled up inside. But yeah, the yellowing is completely, like, ruining this. And for those who tell me, well, retro brighted, it'll turn white again, 2 problems. Number 1, retro brighting is temporary. Give it about 3 years, it'll be right back to the way it was. This is permanent damage. But also, we have incidents like, can you see it on here? So I don't know if you can see it, but this piece is broken. There is a crack through that piece because once there is this much yellowing from sun damage, it becomes incredibly brittle. And not only will retro brighting not bring back the viability of the plastic, it can actually make it more fragile, because now you're adding another chemical problem to the situation. So, yeah, the vehicles might be a complete lost cause for all I know. And I'm still trying to figure that one out as well. So, like I said, this has been like the last 3 days of any spare time I have had at the shop has literally just been this. It has been, try to get as many of these G.I. Joes repaired as possible. Once I have these repaired and intact, and I know how many figures that I'm dealing with, then I need to make sure they are as complete as possible outside of just the sorting the original owner has done. And that will tell me which ones to actually look up, designate a value to, and figure out exactly what we are going to offer in order to buy the collection. It's about as involved as evaluating a toy collection could possibly get. You'd think it's just as simple as just like eBay search them, right? But no, there's a lot. It's a very involved process here when they get this complex, especially when it's a toy line you're not familiar with. And this is hardly the first time this has happened. So we do what we can. So that's basically the precautionary tale. Yes, this is a fun store to work for. This is something of a dream job for a toy collector. The problem with working here is that sometimes jobs like this come in, they're not glamorous. They are not really all that fun. I find the process fascinating. The knowledge and experience in doing this is good to have. But in general, this is going to grate. This is going to grate on me. This is going to wear me down eventually, and I'm going to just get sick of going into G.I. Joe innards. But for now, I thought I'd share the process with you as a precautionary tale. Not every job in this store is fun to do. This is tedious. This is time-consuming. And this, when the toys get frustrating to actually take apart or put together, is it frustrating. But it's part of the job, and it's part of the tasks you're going to have to do when you are in my field. So be cautious. It's not always going to be what you think it is. That's the precautionary tale for the day. And that's the Toy Store Life.
Hello everyone, I am Astral Agent Magnetar, a Tokusatsu VTuber, and I am streaming 4 times a week over on Twitch, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday afternoons, and a special late night one on late Friday/early Saturday. So come watch, come hang out, and let's make an impact together.